All right, number one. Yeah, we got to go. We are. No. Yeah. Hey, yeah. If you were gone, you missed. I posted a video. Okay. So weaknesses. Oh, I need a K in there. Weaknesses. What do you call that? Bottom of your elbow? Ah, there. Now, number one. Guys, this is a one-body government, yes? So that means there is no executive branch. Okay? With no executive branch, you have no ability to enforce your decisions. No enforcement mechanism. And in political science terms, we say the executive branch carries the what? The legislative has the purse, the executive has the sword. Big enough. Okay. So that's the role of an executive, is to carry out the policies of Congress. Okay, and there is no executive branch. There's no judicial branch. Now, we tried to settle some disputes in here between, the different states, right, over the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay and so forth, right? So the 13 representatives in the Articles of Confederation body, as far as settling disputes, that did not go well. And so they were fighting with each other. They were tugging at each other, okay? And the judicial branch really plays this role for us. It's our referee, okay? So if, Nebraska's taking all the water out of the Arkansas River before it gets to us, we can sue in federal courts. Judicial branch will decide who wins. Okay? They had no ability to tax. Okay, so as far as getting money to supply the Continental Army and so forth, they're basically begging the states for money. Okay, these weaknesses provide a very tenuous situation for the colonies. Okay, and this can very much be highlighted on page 40 in Shay's Rebellion. Okay? Why is everybody smiling? You're smiling at me. You're smiling at me.
I'm always smiling.
We're like, once in this class, she's actually happy.
I'm so confused. Why can't I smile today?
Because you're understanding it? Is that why you're smiling?
No.
Why?
Kind of the opposite.
You're making me feel subconscious.
Sorry, I won't look at you. Sorry. What are you doing?
Cadence!
Yes.
Going to state.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yes. That's why I'm smiling out loud. We're really excited. Well, now I'm angry. Roblox.
Hey, let's not get offended, okay?
You
I said I was feeling subconscious. Self-conscious? Subconscious and self-conscious. Sonora, what is going on? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. So, listen, I'm going to read to you guys. This is boring when I read, okay? But you can follow along. All right? Now, you've all heard of Shay's Rebellion, but you don't know this much about Shay's Rebellion. What you're going to know about. Okay? And I'll stop from time to time to expand on some of this. And then we're going to look at some letters that were written by Jefferson and Washington about the events that were taking place in the states after the Articles and how they felt about it. Okay, so let us begin. Daniel Shays was probably born in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, sometime around 1747. During the Revolution, he fought at Bunker Hill, Ticonderoga, where we stole all the cannon from the British, and Saratoga, which was a great victory, yes? Because of this, he was promoted to captain in 1777. Shays resigned from the army after being criticized for selling a sword that the French General Lafayette had awarded him. Okay, now listen, Daniel Shays is poor. He's a soldier, they don't pay him very much, and he served in these great battles, and Lafayette gives him a sword. He's like, hey, thanks, I'm going to sell this because I need some money. And he got criticized for it. He's like, well, fine, then I'll just leave the army. He was pissed and poor. Okay. Afterward, he settled in Pelham, Massachusetts in 1786 and 87. Shays was one of the leaders of an armed uprising in Massachusetts caused mainly by excessive land taxation, high legal costs, and economic depression following the Revolution. The uprising became known as Shays' Rebellion. The insurgents were mostly poor farmers who were threatened with loss of property and imprisonment for debt. Now, hold on a minute. You know, if you guys buy a car and you get a loan on it, you have to pay the monthly payment, and you lose your job and you can't make your monthly payments, do they put you in jail? No, the repo man comes and takes your car because you don't own it. The bank does. Yes? Same thing with your house. If you can't pay your credit card bill, they just keep adding interest. Okay, they don't put you in jail. Now, if you write a check for money that you don't have in your account, that's called fraud. And you can go to jail for that. But your inability to pay debts doesn't put you in jail, and that's what they were doing to these people. Wonder why they're mad. And there's high taxes. We know this already. Americans don't like high taxes. Yes? So people are pissed. Yes? Do they have a right to be pissed? Absolutely. Okay? So they demanded protective legislation, the abolition of the Court of Common Pleas, and a radical reduction in taxes. In 1786, armed mobs prevented the sitting of the courts of Northampton, Worcester, Great Barrington, and Concord. And Shays, with 800 men, broke up a session of the state Supreme Court in Springfield. While attempting to seize the federal arsenal in Springfield, does that remind you of anybody? Yeah, John Brown, anti-slavery guy. Harper's Ferry, what's it called? Right? Yeah. Yep. Okay, so they tried to seize the federal arsenal. Shays and his men were repulsed by state militia in January of 1787. The rebels fled towards Petersham, where they were finally defeated. Most of the men were pardoned a year later. Shays, who was condemned to death, escaped to Vermont and was pardoned a year later. They let all these guys off. This was an armed insurrection, rebellion, trying to seize the federal arsenal in their state. And they let these guys off. Why? Because they weren't wrong. Right? They were protesting. Now, this was armed protest, so this is a little different, right? I mean, this is a rebellion, okay? All right, so in response to this, let me read this. The letters which follow were written by Thomas Jefferson, who was serving as the ambassador of France at the time. Jefferson was not in the United States at the time of the drafting of the Constitution. Nevertheless, he doubtless had some influence on those who were involved in the process with his correspondence, most notably his protege, James Madison. Similarly, John Adams of Massachusetts was serving as ambassador to Great Britain at the time of Shays' Rebellion and the subsequent Constitutional Convention. Adams and his wife, Abigail, had been frightened into believing that Shays' Rebellion would bring the United States to the point of anarchy. Though his response to the incident came after the convention had adjourned, Jefferson hoped to allay what he deemed to be unnecessary fears caused by the upheaval in Massachusetts. Okay. Now, John Adams, think about this. Okay, listen. John Adams was the driving force for independence, right? During the Second Continental Congress. And now he is the ambassador to Great Britain. who he's going to meet with parliamentary leaders and the king. Now, I'd like to have been a fly on the wall watching John Adams going to meet the King of England, George. Okay, now listen, you guys know there are protocols. Like, so if you're going to go meet the Queen of England, if you're fortunate enough to meet Queen Elizabeth, you don't just run up and give her a hug. Okay, you don't touch the Queen. Okay, and back in the 1780s and 90s, there were even more like protocols. So when John Adams walks into the room, the king knows this is the chief rabble rouser that helped lead to independence. Okay, he had received letters from John Adams, right? Some grievances and so forth. Yes. Okay, so he knows who this man is. And so when Adams walks in to meet the king, when you walk in the room, you're not allowed to make eye contact at the beginning. So you walk into the room and you bow, and then you approach the king and you bow again, and you do not speak unless spoken to. John Adams can't speak unless spoken to, okay? So that would have been a very uncomfortable situation, I'm sure, for both men, okay? And one that's just one of those interesting twists in history, okay? And then, of course, Jefferson is in France, right? And his wife has passed away, okay? So he takes his daughter and his house slave at the time, which was, of course, Sally Hemings. You guys know about that whole thing? Yeah, they had multiple children together. Okay. So there is, she was a very light-skinned African American slave, however I want to say that, BC, because she was the offspring of Jefferson's uncle, not father. Some people thought it was her, they shared the same father, but it was her uncle. Yes, so they would have been siblings if it had been her. They're just cousins. Yeah. So there are African Americans in this country that have Jefferson DNA in them, which is
they feel great about that.
yeah. Yeah. He was kind of an influential guy, though. Okay. All right. So Jefferson's writing here to John Adams' son-in-law. His oldest daughter, they called Nabby. That was her nickname, Nabby. And so this guy, William Stephen Smith, married Nabby. And this is what Jefferson has to say about what's happening in Massachusetts. What country before ever existed a century and a half without a rebellion? And what country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. What is Jefferson saying?
Necessary.
Yeah, rebellions are necessary. Protests are necessary. They provide fertilizer for the tree of liberty. Okay? Now, let's talk about this. When you saw protests in Ferguson, Missouri after the Michael Brown shooting, when you saw Black Lives Matters protests over the summer, you had people breaking the law. Some of them doing riots and that sort of arson, that sort of thing. But others were breaking the law more peacefully, like blocking highways, Interstate 70, running through St. Louis or Kansas City or wherever. Okay. Is it legal to block the highway? Did they round all those people up and put them in jail? Generally not. They didn't. Okay. Could they have? Yeah. But they didn't. Because people are upset. And you got to let them blow off that steam. You understand? And if you let people blow off that steam and protest, okay, then, you know, the government hears you, okay, and your voices are heard. And you bring light to that, okay, just like the Canadian truckers are doing right now. Okay, now, the bridge between the United States and Canada has been cleared. Okay, they told the people, said, if you don't leave the bridge, you're going to be arrested. They arrested few. Most of them just left peacefully. Okay, but in Ottawa, they're still protesting. Mayor said, hey, can you move your trucks out of the residential areas? And they have, because this is bothering the people that live there. Okay, but they're staying. They're not leaving until they get what they want. Okay. Now, let's read the next one, and then I'll talk some more. Okay. This is Jefferson talking to Madison. Okay, and this is just prior. This constitutional convention that we're going to talk about today starts in May. In May. Okay, so this is just prior to them, you know, writing a new constitution. And Madison is like the protege of Jefferson. Okay, I am impatient to learn your sentiments about the late troubles in the eastern states. So far as I have seen, they do not appear to threaten serious consequences. Those states have suffered by the stoppage of channels of their commerce, which have not found other issues. Yet, this must render money scarce and make people uneasy. I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing and is necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Unsuccessful rebellions indeed generally establish encroachments on the rights of the people which have produced them. An observation of this truth should render honest Republican governors so mild in their punishments of rebellions as to not to discourage them too much. It is a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. Okay, so again, he's kind of repeating this idea, yes? And of course, Jefferson had read Locke, and we know what Locke said about governments that do not secure our rights, right? All right, let me open the can of worms in here, okay? Let's just get it out on the table. January 6th. Let's get it out on the table. Everybody knows about January 6th, right? Now, there were tens of thousands of protesters in Washington, D.C. on the 6th, which is the date where they officially count the Electoral College votes. Okay? So we elect the electors. They travel to D.C. to cast their votes. The vice president is supposed to read those votes and count those votes in front of the Senate. That is his constitutional duty. Okay? Those protests, which normally take place over by Lincoln's Memorial, okay, made their way over to the Capitol. Yes? And then, I don't know how many people exactly, but at least, 1,000, maybe 2,000 people breached the Capitol and went into the building. Yes? Okay. The only person that died during this protest was one of the protesters who was shot in the neck by a Capitol police officer. She was unarmed. Now, does anybody know her name? Her name was Ashley Babbitt. She was a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Okay. Now, did Ashley Babbitt have a right to be in that building at that point? Absolutely not. None of the protesters did. Okay. So, at a minimum, they were trespassing. Those that assaulted Capitol police officers, are guilty of assault and battery. Those that did vandalism to the Capitol, which amounted, I forget about how much, over $1 million worth of damage to the Capitol. Obviously guilty of vandalism. Okay. Now, as Jefferson says it here, he says, Unsuccessful rebellions generally establish encroachments on the rights of the people that have produced them. Now, if you're not aware of this, because you won't hear it from the mainstream media, there are people that trespass that have been in jail for more than a year now without bail. The 6th and 7th Amendment guarantee us a right to a trial by jury and a speedy trial, which is 120 days. Now, there have been some people, very few of them, that have had their trial, have their day in court. Okay, but many sit without bail in a federal jail, and just, a stone's throw from the Capitol today. Okay. Now, this is being used for political purposes. You understand the Democrats are trying to paint these Trump supporters as, the word is used oftentimes, terrorists or domestic terrorists. Okay. Ava did her interview with somebody that was in the building that day. Okay, she's a former Bishop Carroll student, and she's working for Tracy Mann, who is he was a newly elected. So he was sworn in on the 3rd. So she had been working in the Capitol for all of 3 days. Okay. And all of a sudden, they're like, everybody needs to get to the basement. Something to that effect, right? Like, the Capitol had been breached. And they spent about 8 hours, I think she said, in the basement. There are tunnels underneath the Capitol, so you can leave the Capitol that way. But there were a lot of protesters outside and so forth. So for the safety of the members of Congress and for the people that work there, they kind of kept them locked down for about 8 hours. Okay. The essence that I got from the interview was that this person was never really frightened for her life or anything like that. It was kind of confusing. Now, some of these people that went in did behave badly. I mean, they went into Pelosi's office. I think somebody stole a computer or something. People made it into the Senate chamber, the guy with the horns on and that sort of thing. So, look, it shouldn't happen, right? I mean, Pence has his constitutional duties. He's got to count the votes, right? And these people should be punished. But how much should they be punished? I mean, obviously, we don't want something like this to happen. Okay. And there is some information that needs to be said. Like, people asked for the National Guard to come out that day because they knew there was going to be a large protest. And Nancy Pelosi is in charge of the Capitol as Speaker of the House. She did not listen to those requests for the National Guard to come out. So the Capitol Police were on their own with thousands of protesters. Okay. There are hundreds of hours of video footage from personal phones and from Capitol cameras in the Capitol. Some people would say, release the footage. Let's see what happened. Okay. And I, you guys know me, I'm always looking at news and trying to find stuff out. So, I mean, there's some video footage that is very damning of some of these protesters with the the breaking, the damage to property and so forth, that, and assaulting police officers. Now, because we're in a pandemic, a lot of people were wearing masks, so it's hard to identify some of those people. You know what I mean? But if you release the footage, people can say, "Hey, I know who that is." But why are they not releasing the footage? And Nancy Pelosi, who's in charge of the January 6th committee looking into this, she needs to answer questions why she didn't let the National Guard come in. Okay. There are people believe in conspiracy theories that the FBI was part of this, that they were trying to gin it up, okay, to make Trump people look bad. Okay. Asked under oath in a congressional hearing, the director of the FBI might have been the assistant director, refused to answer the question. Was the FBI there? How many FBI agents were there in the crowd? And the response was, I cannot answer that question. Why won't they answer that question? Okay, and you guys know who Ray Epps is? Okay, so you guys don't follow this as close as I do. Ray Epps is seen on video multiple times encouraging people to go to the Capitol. He's wearing a MAGA hat. It's a big guy, stands out in the crowd. And during one of these videos, people are like, this guy's a Fed. He's working for the Feds. He's trying to get people to do something they shouldn't be doing. Okay. And so Ray Epps encouraged this, was at the gates where protesters broke through, encouraging people to break through. He's never been arrested. In fact, people have gone to his ranch in Texas and tried to interview him and say, Ray Epps, what were you doing at the Capitol? And people assumed that he was probably working for the Feds. He was sent in there to do that, to gin this up. Okay. Now, I don't know exactly how much of that there is, but this is like an uprising. This is like a rebellion. It's being called a insurrection. Remember, it was an unarmed insurrection. Okay, people didn't take weapons, guns into the Capitol. Okay, so I just it's swift denunciation of this, which I think most people said they shouldn't have done this. Others that feel the election was stolen and they felt like they had to do something. Yeah.
The woman who died, she was shot by one of the police officers.
Capitol police officer.
Was it a justified shot or is the police officer?
That's a good question. There's never been an investigation. Maybe an internal one. But her family has, they're trying, but they're not getting much traction with suing this person or the government for that. From what I understand, they were trying to breach a door, had windows on it, and there were a bunch of protesters on one side of the door, and he was on the other side of the door, and he fired his weapon. Struck her in the neck. There were quite a few Capitol Police injured. Okay, so yeah, look, it's modern day what we're talking about here. Okay, now, so you see Jefferson's point of view. Okay, and I just for purposes of teaching this class and talking about American history and our Constitution, our way of life, our way of government. Many of you guys traveled to Washington, D.C. for the March for Life, right? Peaceful protest. Hopefully draw attention to the issue, so forth, okay? And so, there's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it, okay? Peaceful protest is protected under the Constitution. Violent protest is not. So the government has to decide how bad they want to punish these people. And of course, they're being used as political pawns, okay? I have no idea if Donald Trump is running for office in 2020. Okay, everybody's got their opinion on whether they would like to see that or not. I mean, they take polls on this stuff. So right now, Trump's up by 7 points on Biden. Okay, and people keep talking about Hillary too.
Hillary versus Trump.
You don't claim her as a woman? No.
I don't know. All right. Now, anything to add on this? Okay. All right. So can I read the father of our country's words here for you? I may. May I?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Wait,
No.
what?
All right, listen, George Washington has more invested in this thing than anybody that lived through the Revolution. Now, obviously, those that died during the Revolution, they invested their life in it, okay? Washington survived it. He told Martha, I'll be home by Christmas. He showed up 8 Christmases later, okay? He has invested a lot in this. He's watching it fall apart, okay? And he's upset about it. And these are his words. Now remember, Washington's not the smartest guy in the room. he's of average intelligence. And so this is how somebody with average intelligence wrote in 1786. Let us look at our national character and things beyond the present. No morn ever dawned more favorable than our day, and no day was ever more clouded than the present! Exclamation point. Wisdom and good examples are necessary at this time to rescue the political machine from the impending storm. What's the political machine? And the first Constitution, the Articles. Okay? Virginia now has an opportunity to set the latter, and has enough of the former, I hope, to take a lead in promoting this great and arduous work. Now, this is being written to James Madison. Without some alteration to our political creed, the superstructure that have been 7 years raising at expense of much blood and treasure must fall. We are fast verging on anarchy and confusion! Exclamation point. A letter which I've just received from General Knox, who just returned from Massachusetts, is replete with melancholy information of a temper and designs of a considerable part of that people. Among other things, he says, their creed is that the property of the United States has been protected from confiscation of Britain by the joint exertions of all, and therefore ought to be the common property of all. That sounds like. And that he attempts opposition to this creed as an enemy of equity and justice, and ought to be swept from the face of the earth. And again, they are determined to annihilate all debts, public and private, and have agrarian laws which are easily affected by the means of unfounded paper money, which shall be a tender in all cases whatever. He adds, the numbers of these people amount in Massachusetts about 1/5 part of several populous counties, and to them may be collected people of similar sentiment from the states of Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, so as to constitute a body of 12 or 15,000 desperate and unprincipled men. They are chiefly of the young and active part of the community. Turn the page. Now, if you look at the Capitol on January 2nd, a lot of them were old people. Okay? How melancholy is this? Is the reflection in that is so short a space we should have made such large strides towards fulfilling the prediction of our transatlantic foes! Exclamation point. Leave them to themselves, and their government will soon dissolve. Guys, they're over on the other side of the pond laughing at us. They're like, these people think they can start a country from scratch and actually make it work. So we had American businesses that were traded. There were stock markets back then, okay? And that were being traded on European exchanges. And they were trading for a fraction of their actual value because they feared that this country was just going to fall apart, and with it, those businesses. So they didn't trade at the actual value they were worth. Okay? And we're going to, see these predictions come true. Will not the wise and good strive hard to avert this evil? Or will their supineness suffer ignorance and the arts of self-interested, designing, disaffected, and desperate characters to involve this rising empire in wretchedness and contempt? What stronger evidence can be given of the want of energy in our governments than these disorders? If there exists not a power to check them, what security has a man of life, liberty, or property? To you, I'm sure I need not add aught on this subject. The consequences of a lack or inefficient government are too obvious to be dwelt on. 13 sovereignties pulling against each other, all tugging at the federal head, will soon bring ruin on the whole. Here we go. Whereas a liberal and energetic constitution, well guarded and closely watched to prevent encroachments, might restore us to a degree of respectability and consequence, to which we had a fair claim and the brightest future, brightest prospect of attaining. Okay? So Washington's calling for a new constitution, a more energetic constitution, and he's writing to James Madison. Madison takes this to heart. Okay? So he's going to start writing one. Okay? Where's Madison from? Virginia. What's the name of his plan for a constitution? The Virginia plan. Okay? So, we have some fans of Hamilton, the musical Hamilton. Okay. The musical Hamilton is based off of this book by Ron Chernow. Okay. It is a deep dive into American history. Okay. And it covers more than just Alexander Hamilton. Okay. Where'd you go? I had you in there at the right spot, and now you went away. What's going on there? Because I want to read to you some more. I'm having so much fun.
Sounded sarcastic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You'll like what I do after I read. I'm going to put some notes on the PowerPoint up for you. Yeah. For my regular class. Okay. All right. So, this is page 222. Okay. So we're going to be doing notes on the Constitutional Convention today. Okay. 1787. All right. May. The road leading to the Constitutional Convention was a long and circuitous one. It began at Mount Vernon, where Washington is, 1785, when commissioners from Maryland and Virginia resolved a heated dispute over the navigation of the Potomac River. Virginia hoped this might serve as a pattern for settling other interstate disputes, and early 1786 called for a convention in Annapolis for the purpose of framing such regulations of trade as may be judged necessary to promote the general interest. The tutelary spirit, James Madison, was no less despondent than Hamilton about the trade and border disputes rivaling the states. In March of 1786, Madison wrote to Jefferson, then in Paris, the present anarchy of our commerce, and described the way predominantly seaport states were fleecing their neighbors. Appalled by selfish laws issued from state legislatures, Madison warned Jefferson that they had become so frequent and so flagrant to alarm the most steadfast friends of republicanism. Okay, things were bad. Gouverneur Morris went on to say that money problems pervaded all others under the Articles. America was virtually bankrupt, as the federal government and state governments found it impossible to retire gargantuan debt inherited from the Revolution. European securities exchanges, investors expressed skepticism about America's survival. Gouverneur Morris said the fate of America was suspended by a hair. It was falling apart. Okay? So, I was in Annapolis 3 summers ago for my niece's wedding. And of course, as a history geek, I was trying to find where they had this Annapolis convention. Okay? And I found a plaque that said this is where Madison and Hamilton met in Annapolis in 1786. Okay? And I took a picture of it. It's somewhere on my phone. Okay. I didn't put it in my slideshow. Okay, so these are notes that I use for my regular class over the convention. I will add a few things here and there. Starting here. The notes? Yeah. Probably not. Sorry, Thomas.
That's all.
Yeah, Section 4, Constitutional Convention. Okay, May 25th through September 17th, 1787. Okay, so this is a who's who. Now, a couple of the who's are in Europe. Yes? Adams, John, Jefferson. Okay, so 13 states, 55 delegates. Some states will have 3, some will have 4, some will have 5 delegates. Okay, delegate is somebody that represents the interests of another person, like a representative. Yes. Okay. Now check this out. 8 had signed the Declaration 11 years earlier. 7 were at the First Continental Congress 12 years earlier. or 13 years earlier, and 7 of them were governors of their states. So we're going to send Governor Laura Kelly to Philadelphia for 3 months. That's how important this is. You understand? This is big. So they're sending their most influential people back to Philadelphia. Where are they going to meet? What's the name of the building? Independence Hall, formerly Carpenter's Hall, renamed Independence Hall. Okay? Now, notables that are there. Ben Franklin is still alive. We looked him up the other day, didn't we? Yeah. He lived till he was 81. George Washington is there. George Washington walks into the room. And people are like, Washington's here. He's like a god. You understand? Like the most famous man in America. He just walked in the room. Washington brings what we call gravitas. You know gravitas? It was one of your vocab words your junior year.
How do you know what our vocab is?
Because I talk to other teachers, and I have students that remember sometimes.
My teacher never gave us vocab words, so.
Did Fox?
That was sophomore.
Okay, whatever. Gravitas. Yeah. Yeah, gravity, weight. Yeah, experience, wealth of it, right? Okay, I got to stop and pause for a second, okay, because I got to talk about gravitas. When you guys were not born yet, in the year 2000, George W. Bush was running for president, governor of Texas, okay? And he put in charge a gentleman to look for who his running mate would be, his vice presidential candidate. The guy he put in charge of that looked all over, talked to different people that might be a good political fit. And in the end, the guy that he put in charge said to Bush, he said, look, I think I'm your best guy. His name was Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney had a wealth of experience, had served in the Nixon administration, had served in Congress, had served as Secretary of State. I mean, this guy, he's got a resume almost as good as Mike Pompeo has. Who's lost like 80 pounds, is positioning himself to run for president. Now, he's not going to win, but he might end up like Kamala did, running for president as a vice presidential running mate because of all that experience he has. You know what I mean? So if you get somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience, then you want somebody that has a lot of experience. Or somebody that has gravitas. So when it was announced that Cheney was going to be the running mate, this talking head on ABC News says Cheney brings gravitas to the Bush ticket. 10 minutes later on CNN, another talking head. Cheney brings gravitas. Fox News, a few minutes later, gravitas. NBC, gravitas. CBS, gravitas. Saturday Night Live, gravitas. Okay, so they did a whole sketch on gravitas because nobody had ever heard this word before. Okay, and now everybody's using it. And that's funny. Yes? Now, if you were alive back then, you'd remember this. But you're taking a political science class, so I'm just telling you this story because you should know it. Yes? So you can have a discussion with somebody that's my age, and they talk about gravitas. I know what that is. I know what you're talking about. Yes? Go try it out on mom or dad. Okay? See if they remember the link to Dick Cheney. All right? Okay. Now, who's not there? Okay, we know John Adams isn't there. Jefferson's not there. Patrick Henry of Virginia's not there. And he's not there because he doesn't like this idea. Because Patrick Henry's all about liberty. And he wants the power to remain in Virginia. He doesn't want to give that power up to some national government that's going to dictate your liberty to you. So Patrick Henry will become the loudest voice against this new Constitution. He could have gone, but he chose not to. Okay? Since he's the man with the most gravitas, Washington will be named chairman of the Constitutional Convention. He's in charge. You could refer to him as president of the convention as well. Chairman's probably the correct term. And then little James Madison. Jefferson's protege, as we already discussed, has a plan. He shows up early. Now, when they announced the Virginia plan, guys, introduce it to the convention, Madison doesn't introduce it himself. He lets Edmund Randolph do it for him, so he can sit back and read the room as they read this plan of government to the other delegates. And then he takes notes. It is Madison's notes that we have from this convention that explain the debate over all of these issues concerning our Constitution. They're very valuable. And because they're going to scrap the articles, they've got to start somewhere in writing a new Constitution, so they start with the Virginia plan. So it becomes the basis from what they work from. Okay? Now, Madison doesn't get everything he wants in the Virginia plan, in the new Constitution. There's 12 other states in the room. He's not going to get exactly what he wants. Okay? But we're going to give him the title, Father of the Constitution. Okay? Which is probably more important than his role as President of the United States when he was president, our fourth president. This is probably more important than that, I would say, historically. Okay? Now, let me give you a few other things about these 55 men. The average age was 42. Life expectancy was about 46. Okay? They were all rich, with the exception of one guy. You don't need to know his name for the test. He was a farmer named William Few. He was a man of few possessions. FEW. 31 of 55 had attended college. Now, they all believed in this social contract theory. They've all read Locke. They've all read Rousseau. They've all read Hobbes, Montesquieu, Blackstone. They're all well read. And they all share a fear of democracy in common. You guys remember when I told you they refer to it as mobocracy? Okay. So they're looking at a republic here, but they're going to change from a confederal system to a federal system, right? Carson, define federalism for me. Didn't we do this the other day?
Yeah.
And I picked on you?
Oh, you picked on Noah.
Oh.
I don't remember what Noah said.
Remember what I said?
National government.
Okay. Yeah. The sharing or division of powers between the levels of government. Yeah. Yeah. You got it. Somebody whisper that to him.
No.
Good job, Carson. All right. Your name may be next. You might want to remember this. Okay. All right. Yeah. So,
I have like half a minute.
really?
Yeah.
You guys are still behind.
How are we
We're fourth hour, we'll catch up.
Yeah, we'll catch up. Okay, real quick. They agreed on this, that they needed to establish a system of mutual frustration. A system of mutual frustration. You think Joe Biden is frustrated with Congress? You think Republicans are frustrated with Democrats and vice versa? Vice blocking vice with vice. You have your self-interest, I have mine. I will block your self-interest with mine, and you will try and block my self-interest with yours. That's the system. As Churchill said, it's the worst form of government ever contrived by man, except for all the rest. It's a system of mutual frustration. That's what they're going to try and write. So the government does not become too powerful. Yes?
Yeah.
Rock and roll. Pick up from there.
Change into my stroke.
Bye.